I'm here this morning with Representative Drew Darby. You've got a busy day planned. As I walked in, you had one group already here in the office this morning. What group were they that were visiting?
They were the teachers, ATPE, which is the teachers group. It's their day at the Capitol, and so I guess altogether I probably had about 30 teachers in my office today already, and they're all from back home. They're all from Big Spring and San Angelo and Ballinger and Winters, and it's all the West Texas folks. And I cautioned them about driving in, and of course having to get home early tonight before the ice sets in.
Yeah, but fortunately it sounds like we didn't have quite as much as they had originally predicted, which is good. I also understand on your agenda today is a hearing at 2 o'clock. What all are you going to be covering this afternoon?
Well, it's a joint hearing between the House Energy Resources Committee that I chair and, of course, Chairman Keffer's Natural Resources Committee. And we're going to be looking at the interreaction between our natural resource being water and our other natural resources being oil and gas, and how they interact together, and how we need to protect both. We need to protect, obviously, our energy resources, and again, protect our very fragile and limited water supply. So this will be an informative session that both full committees will meet, and we won't be discussing any specific bills, but we'll be talking about just general oil and gas policy and general water policy throughout the state of Texas.
So trying to gain a knowledge in both of those areas and how they can work together, or
yes,
what in particular?
Absolutely. We can coexist together and still balance the priority needs of the oil and gas industry, but our West Texas community and agricultural, industrial, and municipal needs. Being a long-standing oil and gas lawyer and water rights lawyer, I understand the intricacies of both policies. However, there's a few on my committee that have never been associated with this. So we've got some new members on the committee. Of course, I'm new to the committee, and the same way with natural resources. So we got members that they're new to the committee, and so we want to give them a broad approach to the issues, and so as we move through specific bills, they can have that background information.
Very good, very good. I was noticing online that there are several bills and resolutions that you are a part of, have co-authored or authored, and one of them in particular is the exemption from sales tax on firearms and supplies.
Yes.
What's the thinking behind that? Of course, all our friends back home with those firearms, I'm sure, are most interested.
Well, it's a way to support our Second Amendment rights, and obviously the hunting industry is very important to Texas, and certainly to West Texas for that matter, and it gives us an opportunity to say to those who support hunting and fishing in this state that this is a holiday that supports your investment in our Second Amendment rights, and obviously in your passion for hunting. And it's a way that we can encourage the participation by a lot of Texans in hunting and fishing, which are so important here in Texas.
Absolutely. Is there a proposed deadline to this sales tax holiday?
There wouldn't be a deadline. Of course, the question is, when's it going to be, in order to encourage that type of activity, and how long is it going to last, that sort of thing. But that will be open to debate as the bills come up for discussion.
Along that same line, I noticed you are also involved in proposing a constitutional amendment relating to the right to hunt, fish, and harvest wildlife. Some additional info on that?
Well, it's not a part of the Texas Constitution. When we look at some of the stated rights here in this state, that's not one of them. The inherent right to hunt and fish, and so. I can't remember the representative who's sponsoring that bill, but I think maybe Representative Ashby, but certainly we want to make sure that not only for this generation but for future Texans that we have the ability to hunt and fish without abridgment.
One of the other interesting constitutional amendments I noticed you're involved with is to dedicate a certain money to the purpose of retiring state debt early. That's
Absolutely.
a biggie. Tell me.
That's a biggie. I look at this kind of like my own family budget, and certainly yours and the people that are viewing this article. When we have money available to us, what's the first thing we do? We pay off a credit card. We pay off a debt in order to reduce that obligation upon our family. And I think it's prudent that as we look through this next session, that where we have the ability not only to meet the priority needs of this state on an ongoing basis, that we look also for opportunities to pay down our existing debt. Now we want to make sure that there are safeguards in place to make sure that we don't pay it down and then immediately reborrow it, but I think there's some checks and balances there that we can have in place that will permit us to pay that debt down, save the interest expense, and to move forward with the assurance that we're not simply going to reborrow that money without some checks and balances.
Is there a potential dollar amount that potentially could be used for this that's being discussed?
Well, I don't think there's a dollar amount yet. We're still early in the process. The House has introduced a fairly responsive budget that meets the priority needs of the state. It does not include any proposed tax measures that will come through a separate committee, Ways and Means, to do that. So we're going to look at opportunities to meet the current obligations of this state, meet the growth of our public education system, meet the obligations of several of the programs, whether it be for our retired teachers or for our employees. We're going to need to meet those obligations, but in the end, if there's money available under the spending cap, we're not going to bust the spending cap to do this, but if there's money available under the spending cap, that we want to make sure that we at least consider the option of paying down some of our debt.
I know that will be well received by your constituents back home for sure. One other that I noticed was you're involved with a resolution urging the U.S. Congress to end the ban on crude oil exports.
Absolutely. I think that's been one of the strangest federal policies that we have. Right now, there's only two things you can't export. That's oil, crude oil, and horses. So, it just doesn't make sense to me. Texas can be a net exporting state, and just to have that option available for if we want to export crude oil, I think is paramount. And so I'm on a committee that we're going to have I've signed on to Representative Anchia's bill, and we'll have a hearing on that, and I'm thinking about combining his committee with my committee, my energy committee, in order to discuss that bill and try to get behind it and to send a message to Washington that we want the ability to export oil here in Texas.
I was going to ask you, you are chairing the Energy Resource Committee. Particular goals this particular session?
Well, I'm charged with the responsibility of oversight of the Railroad Commission, and obviously the largest industry in Texas in terms of dollar taxes paid, revenues, severance taxes paid, jobs account for about 40% of the Texas budget. So this is an important committee, and so my duty is to make sure that we have some certainty in that industry and we have some predictability. So my task will be to bring that certainty and predictability. And so one of the issues first and foremost up is going to be the issue of urban drilling. There's been some discussion up in the Denton area and down around College Station, and so what I think I need to bring from my committee standpoint is we need to bring some certainty back to that circumstance, so that not only do cities know what they can and can't do, but obviously industry knows how they can interact. There's no question that cities have the right to manage the health and safety of their citizens, but there's also an obligation on the state to foster the full development of our oil and gas resources. My challenge is to try to bring good, sound state policy to accommodate both of those goals.
Well, you're going to be busy with that, as well as you're also on the Ways and Means Committee. What all is involved in the Ways and Means? That's not real descriptive, but for those that aren't familiar with it.
Well, Ways and Means is basically the tax committee. If you want to generate revenue here in this state, you have to, or it has to originate in the Ways and Means Committee. The Senate cannot initiate a tax bill. It has to come out of the Texas House of Representatives, and it has to come out of this committee. So when we look at the margins tax, or the franchise tax as some would call it, the old franchise tax, when we look at property tax relief and other measures that affect every Texan's daily life, the Ways and Means Committee is the committee that discusses those taxes and revenues and decides whether they're fair, whether they're appropriate, and whether they're achieving the goals for which they were originally initiated, or do we need to look at some other way to create revenue on behalf of the state's needs.
Do you foresee pulling back some on taxing?
I do. I think there will be a concerted effort this session to make sure that our current tax system is fair, that's being uniformly applied, and that the revenue generated is an appropriate amount of revenue for the state's needs. We'll also look at some sort of curtailment of our existing tax policy, whether reduction of rates, certainly exemptions is going to be on the table. So we're going to have a very spirited and important discussion. I will say that I think any discussion of our tax rate needs to consider three very important goals. One, it needs to be meaningful tax relief. I think it must rise to the level of making a difference in people's lives. It must be sustainable. There's no sense trying to create a tax cut this session and have to come back next session and raise taxes to meet a declining economy here in Texas. So it must be meaningful, it must be sustainable, and thirdly, it must be beneficial to the long-term needs of this state. Does it fix the problems that are facing Texas? Have we addressed the needs of our state when we look at this revenue source? So that's going to be an important discussion.
Anything else that's going on right now that you'd like to share?
Well, I think, we're just getting started. We've got about probably right at 2,000 bills that have been filed. We've got a whole slew of bills that we're fixing to file that we've had drafted, and we're working out some of the details of. I'm going to be carrying HB 7 again this session, which is a huge look at our general revenue dedicated accounts to make sure that we reduce fees where necessary and cut spending and making sure that we honor the obligation we have with taxpayers, that if we raise a fee for a specific purpose, then we darn sure need to make sure that that fee goes for that purpose, and we simply don't divert it for another purpose. And if we're collecting too much money, my mission and role is to reduce the amount we collect to make sure that it's an appropriate level. We're going to be cutting a lot of fees. I'm hopefully going to have about $1 billion worth of either tax cuts or fee adjustments that will benefit Texans.
Wonderful. Well, while you're cutting there, our roads will still be continuing on out in our area, correct? Is there any new ones that are coming on?
We're going to have, my challenge is to make sure we have the money necessary to support roads in West Texas. Road financing is going to be a critical issue facing the legislature. We need to make sure more resources devoted to fixing and repairing the roads out in West Texas.
Well, we appreciate the work that you've done helping us out there right now on several of our highways very much. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to visiting with you again in the future.
Thank you, Kat. This has been a great process.
Thank you.